Welcome to the Art of Procurement podcast. My name is Philip Ideson, a 20-year procurement practitioner, former head of procurement and advisor to procurement leaders around the world. I started out of procurement to help leaders and their teams access the resources they need to increase their impact through insight-driven procurement. You are listening to our flagship podcast where we pull back the curtain and shine a light on the strategies, tactics and tools that leading procurement teams are using to align their impact with the needs of their business. And in today's podcast, I'm delighted to be joined by Marcell Vollmer, partner and director at Boston Consulting Group, or BCG, and Christoph Bode, the professor at the Business School for the University of Mannheim, and he holds the Endowed Chair of Procurement at the University of Mannheim as well. Now, Marcell and Christoph collaborated alongside ISM to survey the procurement profession, resulting in the publication of their findings in the aptly titled State of the Procurement Profession 2021. We dissect the key findings in today's podcast, which focused on entrepreneurial orientation, digitization, and ESG, while we also look into the data to explore the reporting structure for procurement, where procurement as a function actually reports into here in late 2021. Okay, so let's roll the tape where I start by asking Marcell if he found procurement or if procurement found him.
Great question, Phil. And I have to say, procurement found me. I got an offer I couldn't refuse. So by my boss, the group CFO at SAP, and after doing all the transformational projects, I got hired to set up shared services. I was leading some of the largest post-merger integrations at SAP. I got a question that after we looked into the internal optimization potential, process improvements, setting up shared services, globalizing it, what can we do on our external spend? And this basically started the conversation. And also I got promoted as Chief Procurement Officer. And procurement really found me, I would say, and not so much that I was looking into procurement, because I could not even imagine a procurement function at the point in time when I was reviewing my career opportunities at SAP back then.
And you stayed with it?
I did, and I do, yes. Since 2011, I got promoted as Chief Procurement Officer. I stayed in that role 4 years. I moved on, being part of the acquisition integration team, Ariba, Fieldglass, Concur, in the Cloud Business Group as COO, and then later on as Chief Digital Officer. And I continued even at Celonis when I was looking into process analytics, process mining on the innovation side. And now as a partner here at BCG, I'm excited. Since August last year, I'm here at BCG and help companies around the globe to define their strategy for the future of procurement and drive the digital transformation successfully, establishing a bionic procurement function.
And Christoph, I'd like to just get a little bit of your background in terms of how you became involved in procurement as well.
Yeah, I would say it's exactly the inverse. I would say that I found procurement. I'm a professor of procurement at one of the largest business schools in Germany now, and now since 7 years here in Mannheim. But my original background is industrial engineering.
Okay.
When I studied and then did my PhD, as a good industrial engineer in Germany, you start with optimization and logistics, and I looked in supply chains and the typical inventory, transportation, news vendor optimization issues. But at some point, I realized that most of the intriguing questions that I actually were interested in is about upstream supply chains and suppliers. And then it turned out that I realized, okay, this has a name. It's called procurement. So dealing with the supply base and the questions that are connected in terms of management. So at some point, I found out, hey, there's a field and it's called procurement, and I would like to do more in that area. And then all the way, I had a couple of positions in the Netherlands. I've been briefly in the United States, and then I got an offer from the University of Mannheim. They basically called me and say, we have created a new research group. It's called Procurement, and would you like to come to Mannheim and take responsibility for leading that group? And this is also where I ran into Marcell, because SAP is close to Mannheim, and they were also one of the founding companies that initially and still do financially support my research group. And yeah, this is how I actually found procurement.
Interesting. So do you find, obviously you talked about the fact that you teach procurement. Do you feel that there's more of an interest on the outside of people choosing procurement as a profession than stumbling across procurement, which is, frankly, what 99% of us, I think, in procurement, at least those of us that have been in the function for some time, did. Is there more demand for people actually taking interest in a career in procurement right at the very beginning of their careers?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we still have a long way to go. I said I'm in a large business school here in Germany, and to be very frank, many of our talents they want to start in marketing or finance, investment banking, or go directly to Marcell's here consulting, top management consulting, and whatever, do strategy things. And I need to in my courses also throw the baits and say, hey, innovation, risk, sustainability, these are all the kind of exciting topics that you are actually interested in, and procurement is really the place to go, the place to be, and maybe the place to stay if you want to work on these interesting topics. So I still need to do marketing for this topic, and we're still not there. At least here in the top business schools, I would say that we. That lots of people rush into our programs and say, hey, I would love to make a career in procurement from the very start on.
Which is shocking, Christoph. We should do much more on that. When I ask students in these large rooms, 400, 500 students, I ask who wants to work in procurement. It is really only one who is raising the hand, and another one is slowly now going through a thought process, which you can observe by his slowness, how he is raising the hand. On the other side, ask the same question on marketing. And half of the room is basically, at least in economics, saying, hey, I could envision that, which is interesting because procurement for me is the best function where you can get an overview about the entire organization, the business model. You get into the stakeholders. You really understand the company you are working for. There is no other place where you really have an opportunity to reach out to so many different parts of the organization. And therefore, I'm a big fan, a big promoter of the procurement function to start in that profession. And then later on, decide if you want to stay or if you want to do something different. We have a different way in how we define the future of work. So procurement is definitely a great place to start, but also to continue at a certain point in time, a little bit later in the career.
Yeah, I think it's one of those areas why so many of us find the profession and stay with it. What you said there, Marcell, and what the realization of the impact that you can have. But just having a program like Christophs, I think, is the first step, isn't it? At least having somewhere for people to go gives us the maybe it's baby steps, but it's it's going in the right direction.
Exactly. I can just also underscore that I think we need to start, and then over time, that will also bring fruits and resonate. And of course, we need also the companies that pull the talents. So, for example, Marcell, when you come to the university, when Marcell quite frequently does also guest talks here in Mannheim, and we need also these shiny brands like BCG or others, the big automotive OEMs, so that they highlight, or also SAP, by the way, it's also a great employer here in Germany and beyond, so that they come and say, we have very interesting topics in procurement, and consider maybe this as a part of your career journey.
Well, I want to talk today about a survey that you both participated in called the State of the Procurement Profession Survey. That's 2021. I have it open in front of me, actually. Before I ask about some of the key takeaways, I just wondered, Christoph, if you could talk a little bit about how you got involved with the research project, and a little bit more about, who it was that you were talking to and surveying.
Yeah. So Marcell, well, I need to also say Marcell is also he has also a PhD, so he has also some real research background and also still interest. And ever since we uh, ran into each other like 7 years ago, we juggled ideas of common or some joint research projects and procurement. And Marcell, you have been doing or surveying the state of the procurement profession and in terms of, for example, digital transformation. So already like 5-6 years. And so at some point we decided to do it together.
Mm-hmm.
So this is now the fourth round that we run this together. And Marcell even did it before. I mean, he's one of the best connected persons in the field of procurement that I actually know. So we were also able to use parts of his very large network. And in the recent 2021 report, we were able to join forces with ISM in the United States and also the large membership community around the world to have one of the largest ever, actually, procurement surveys.
So if I can ask you kind of the headlines before we go into the details, what were the headlines, the key takeaways of the survey, the 2021 survey?
Mm-hmm. So key takeaways. So we looked obviously at a couple of domains. First of all, we looked at what are the key performance metrics that procurement senior leadership in procurement considers relevant. And here we found that cost is still the most dominant objective, very much dominating all the others. And sustainability is considered the least relevant when pitted against the others. Then we looked at a specific cultural trait in procurement organizations, which we called entrepreneurial orientation, because we were curious to see whether that plays a role. And we found out that indeed it does. Those procurement organizations that have this entrepreneurial mindset, they are massively procuring better than their competition. And then we looked in a deep dive into sustainability because we wanted to understand, okay, what are companies doing there? Are they already pulling, the levers in that direction? And quite frankly, there's not so much going on yet.
Yeah.
And the final thing, obviously, also Marcell is very much interested in the digital transformation. So we wanted to understand, okay, what are current trends here, strategic directions, what are also roadblocks in unleashing further performances here. And we found that at the moment there's what we might consider a little bit of, let's say, procurement is realizing, or the procurement profession is realizing that kind of the hype is taming down, and we are arriving at some reality check.
So I'm going to ask Marcell. Christoph said that this is a survey that you've been doing in some forms for a number of years. As you kind of look at what the findings were in 2021, is there anything that surprises you, or maybe anything that's accelerated beyond what you may have expected when you set out to do the 2021 survey?
Yeah, great question, Phil. And definitely there are two things I would like to highlight. Number one is I was really surprised by getting a question about the priorities, and this was the starting point also for me. I was interested when I started with that. What is it really? What keeps the CPOs awake during the night? And not a big surprise when you look at the priorities: cost, procurement savings, number one. Absolutely clear. I was surprised, and then we had quality, risk, speed. I was surprised by innovation very low and sustainability the lowest in the ranking of today. And this was really a big surprise. What I have seen. A second surprise is, and this is the first time since 2017 when I started, that basically we had always the question in how important is for you the digital transformation, and what are your priorities here? We had always a confirmation rate of about 80 plus percent. 83% in 2018, 82 in 2019, 80% 2020, and now 63%.
Right.
63% of the participants believe that digital transformation will affect their procurement organization more in 2021 than in 2020, which is interesting by knowing and thinking about, wow, always it was over 80%. It could be two reasons. Number one is, hey, we are now done. We have really digitalized and we are at the next level. So therefore, let's slow down. There are different
Yeah.
priorities right now. Or on the other side, there's, and that's Christoph's and my interpretation, there's a little bit now a valley of disillusionment, what we see right now, that in procurement the investments are not really at the same level like in lots of other functions, and by that people simply start losing the trust that a digital transformation will really go to the next level. These are the two main findings we were really surprised about.
I would just add also, Marcel, that I mean, if you consider the very high level of heavy breathing and salesmanship around digital transformation in the last 5 years, that this disillusion is also a good thing. Just on following up on what you said, that the companies and the leadership is realizing what kind of technologies are really relevant and which technologies turned out to be more of a fad or something that does not, I mean, only in a few, maybe like a example, blockchain and distributed ledger, fantastic technology, but it's not going to be a game changer in many procurement applications during the next couple of years. So that this disillusionment is actually maybe also a good thing that we have, that we are arrive in reality and pursuing those technologies in more detail that really provide value.
Do you think that could be related to kind of hype as well? You know, there's been so much marketing around digital transformation across the industry that, you know, perhaps that's not married with the pragmatism of what it's really like on the ground floor, so to speak, in transforming a procurement function. Maybe some of the promises haven't come to fruition yet, which is creating some disillusionment.
Yeah, well, we have also asked companies whether they have a strategy, a roadmap in place for digital transformation, and almost all surveyed companies do have something like that in place. But the satisfaction with the execution of this strategy is very low. So I think what we see is that top level wise, they all have done their homework.
Yeah.
They know where they want to go and have a roadmap and action plan in place. But now it needs to materialize also in the organization, and it just a top down does not work. It needs to also now sediment in the outskirts of the organization and then ripple up again, bottom to the top, so that these technologies are really used and implemented. And think this is to some extent the reason for the frustration. So they have a plan, but they don't really know yet how to make it so that it
Into practice.
resonates with the organization.
Yeah. Marcel, do you think that there's anything in kind of the overwhelm, perhaps? There's been so many, it's a really vibrant startup community within procurement, and there's a lot of innovations that are coming into procurement tech from outside procurement, that are kind of tried and tested, I think, in the sales, the marketing arenas that are now coming to procurement. Is this risk of there's so much new technology or so many new options that the organizations aren't really sure what to do, and so they have this paralysis because there's too many options?
That's a great assumption. What it really is, besides the technology side, I would also add the bionic digital mindset, what is needed. So a shift for the mindset by really also working with these technologies and also adapting the new way of working in a digital, in a bionic procurement organization. I would also add this one. And when you look into the reasons, we see also that there are certain budget constraints. We see issues like master data quality. We also see challenges on the access of internal talents, what we have seen in the previous years.
Yeah.
And these might be also reasons why the digital transformation in procurement, despite all the, and I couldn't agree more, Phil, on what you were saying, we have really beautiful technology available, from RPA, really basic stuff, to more advanced machine learning, artificial intelligence. We can integrate market insights. We have real-time tracking information for ships when something got stuck in the Suez Canal, what we have seen, or a ship or a container is not even leaving a harbor, a port, what's happening? We can basically also connect here the dots and get lots of insights we can use and make it an integrated part of the procurement function. And that's really where I see there is probably a bunch of reasons on the internal side, and then also on the right priorities, what companies have, what is really important and what is the value. And we have seen the value of supply chain management and procurement in times of COVID-19, as well as in a crisis. I got appointed 2011 as CPO, 10 years back, when we had Fukushima. By the way, in the same year, we had also the flood in Thailand. So I think there is a need that we need to leverage the technology and also the insights what we have access to. And procurement needs now really to go one step further in also adapting and using the beneficial technologies.
Now, one of the things that you said, which surprised me, and you said that it surprised you as well. In fact, both of you mentioned this. And so, Christoph, I'll ask you first, is around ESG and sustainability. You know, anecdotally, we're hearing so much about the importance and the rising importance of sustainability. Certainly here in the States, I've heard it more in the last 6 months than I've probably heard it in a number of years. So I was a little bit surprised to hear some of what the data is saying. I just wonder if you could kind of go a little bit deeper in terms of what you saw from a sustainability perspective in the survey results.
Yeah, so indeed, so we had two formats of querying this topic in the survey. So when we asked them on a rating scale, so how important do you consider sustainability? Everybody says extremely important. But if you force the participants to rank order objectives, so in a sense that they have to really then decide which is more important, which is less important, then it turns out that it's trailing to the bottom. And this is the surprising finding. And I would argue this is some sort of an intention action gap. So we all know we are all aware that something needs to be done. But in terms of executing that, I think it's not so clear how should it be done. We lack measures. We don't really know how to communicate successes, maybe on the sustainability front. I mean, I can just say also in Europe, we have so much discussion on CO2 equivalent reduction, but it's a very difficult task to measure scope 3 emissions, let alone for complex supply chains and things like that. So that's, I think, why it's so much easier if you were to show the contribution of procurement at the moment, to still focus on what you're good at, and that's cost, and that's maybe a couple of other things, including risk at the moment. But sustainability, if I were a CPO, I would even also have, I would have to ask me, how can I get a superstar in sustainability? I wouldn't know. Marcell, maybe you can tell me, if I want to be a sustainability CPO superstar, how can I show that to my board, to my investors? Any ideas?
I think number one is you are sitting on all the data and the largest ecosystem on relationships impacting sustainability targets. When you look at scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, how it's defined on the environmental, social, and governmental levers, what all the companies are looking in, procurement really is at a key inflection point by making impact and also getting the arms around by no longer just talking about, but really working with the entire ecosystem together. And this is exactly where I would see a beautiful opportunity on the procurement side. And if a CPO wants to become a superstar in sustainability, managing and providing the insights from all the suppliers along the supply chain, I think this could be very impactful. If we are now seeing that CO2 is getting a price per kilogram what you have as emission, basically then it relates back, and it will be a decision also which relates to the cost a company needs to pay.
Mm-hmm.
It will be more expensive to getting a container from Asia compared to some regional sourcing opportunities what you might have, because you need to factor in the transportation cost and the emissions which are related to that. And this is exactly also where only a CPO basically has the opportunity here to get all the data and measure the KPIs needed to drive ESG.
That being said, do you think that, and Marcell, I'll ask you this as kind of a follow-up, for CPOs to really get involved in and to be leading the charge with sustainability, is that going to be a top-down mandate? It's going to have to be something that is in response to, the CEO objective, as opposed to a procurement team trying to make sustainability, a bigger part of what they do.
Absolutely. You need to start with a vision. What is it what you want, and translate this into action, into a strategy where you say, as a company, we want to become net zero, like BCG, for example. The former CEO, Rich Lesser, last year announced we want to become net zero by 2030.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a leadership mandate, very clear, communicated to the outside world and also internally. I'm part of BCG, so therefore I see what's happening. We are looking now into the different levers on how we can impact and how we can really make a change. COVID-19 is one reason, for example, why we have, by definition, less travel, which is contributing here to the ESG targets. But basically, you need to start really with a clearly communicated goal. You need to also give a clear mandate to the procurement organization that this needs now to be factored in what we want to allow as CO2 footprint or as ESG KPIs in general, to make it a little bit broader. And then procurement needs to execute, needs to measure it, make it transparent, and also make it an integrated part of every single sourcing decision around the world.
Now, the third kind of key takeaway that you talked about, and Christoph, I'm going to ask you this, is you talked about this notion of entrepreneurial orientation. I wonder if you could just speak a little bit more as to what that concept or what that notion is.
Yes. So here we wanted to assess a cultural, if you want, or orientation of procurement, a trait or orientation of the procurement function. And entrepreneurial orientation is a well-established construct in the management field, management literature. It has been around since the beginning of the 90s, but it has never really been studied inside the procurement domain. So it has been studied, let's say, in startup companies, in top management teams and things like that, and usually shown to be a very powerful feature. So basically, if you have it, then you're doing better than your competition. And so we were one of the first that now set it up in the procurement and measured it in the procurement context. And what this construct entails is four things. So it's a risk-taking propensity, it's autonomy, it's like innovativeness, and like it's like some sort of a competitive aggressiveness. So if you think of these four elements: risk taking, autonomy, innovativeness, and aggressiveness towards the competition, so not aggressiveness against your colleagues.
Yeah.
but, but you can easily think now what that means also. Let's say if you go into a negotiation or deal with suppliers and assertive and try to get you what you need in terms of your objectives there, then that is helpful. And what we found is that, first of all, those that are equipped with this entrepreneurial orientation that score relatively high do indeed better than their competition. So they buy better, they are performing better on all types of performance objectives. In particular, they excel in innovation. So, which is also not coming as a big surprise. I get it, but it's like underscoring that this is like entrepreneurial mindset is really what you need to establish if you want to get more innovation out of your supply base. And the second thing is that those organizations that have it, they are also more satisfied. So
Yeah.
the employees that work there are more likely to recommend to a good friend or a good colleague to start working in their procurement organization than those that have a lower entrepreneurial orientation. So it basically cuts on two ends. It's cutting against the competition, and it's helping you also keep what we said, procurement like a place to go, place to stay, place to be type of area.
And so this entrepreneurial orientation, Marcell, from a functional perspective, is this something that is driven, or is it measured at the organizational level or the individual level? So what I mean is, like, do we have to think of the leaders setting this entrepreneurial environment, creating this entrepreneurial environment at the top, or is it really just based on hiring? Who are the folks who come in? What's their skill sets? Do they have maybe a bigger picture thinking than a traditional procurement professional?
I think it's pretty easy. Think about the money you spend like it is your own money. Would you buy that? If you ask this question, and Phil, for me, it doesn't matter if this is an internal employee or someone we want to hire. I think the entrepreneurial orientation is absolutely key. I know on a corporate side you call it intrapreneurship,
Yeah.
what you're using as a term. I couldn't agree more. But make it very simple for the people. If this would be your company, would you spend the money in that way with that supplier for what he is offering? And I think this is something everyone can answer for himself, for herself, and by that, supporting here, taking the right decisions, raising the hand by saying, hey, this doesn't make sense, or is this really something which is needed? To also ask the challenging questions back to the line of business.
So it's almost is associated with something that Christoph, you said, was around entrepreneurial orientation is correlated with employee satisfaction. It's almost like making them care. Like, why should your employees care that they should be spending the money like it's their own money? And that's the connector. So once they care, then they're going to be making much more holistic decisions versus if they really don't care and they just see it as a job.
Then it's also correlated, I guess. So if you're doing a good job, if you see successes coming out of your activities and actions, that will also again make you more satisfied. So it's like a positive feedback loop here. But it starts all with the right mindset, and that's what you said maybe at the very beginning of our conversation. How important it is to get the right talent with the right mindset. At the end of the day, the story is very simple. If you have good people, then you will have good results, and that is what we need to do here.
Now, there's one other area of the survey that I just want to touch on in our conversation today, and that's about where procurement reports to. As a consultant myself, I always have questions of where should we report? Should we report to the CEO? Should we report to the CFO? Should we report to the chief legal officer, and what are all the pros and the cons? So I think it's an age-old challenge, and I wonder if, first of all, I'll pose it to Christoph, just if you could share a little bit about the data in terms of where you found that procurement does report into.
Okay, so I just from a theoretical perspective, I can say I'm not an organizational theorist, right? So I'm talking like with a little bit of distance here, but I would argue there's no cookie cutter format. There's a famous quote from Jay Galbraith, a famous organizational scholar. He said that there's no best way to organize, but any way of organizing is not equally effective. So it basically says there are many kind of solutions out there that will work, but that does not mean that it's irrelevant. And I think in that vein, I mean, we found that most of our respondents report to the CFO, to COO, and some actually, I think almost like fifth actually have also a CPO role, even in the top management team. So like on the C-suite board level. But of course, for us as a topic, it would be great to have it represented as high as possible in the top management team. That's where you can then also get the biggest impact on these topics. And we said it in the beginning, how important the topics are. And also Marcell just mentioned it. So it's really in procurement being at the nexus of the most important topics of our time: risk, sustainability, innovation. Then I would argue it's important to have them also close to the top management level. But it will probably also work one way or another. It's I think at the end of the day, for organization, oftentimes also more of a question of good strategy, good execution, and then you can get it also work, be it more centralized or decentralized or hybrid or reporting to whatever. It's more of a question of getting a good plan, and then it will follow. That will then the organization, if they see the results, I think you will also get the attention. Right. But Marcell, feel free to disagree.
No, I absolutely agree, and I even can provide some more data on that. At BCG, we did an analysis on the S&P 500 stock price market development between 2000 and 2020, and what we could see is companies with procurement and supply chain management chiefs in leadership outperform the market by 130%, 134 to be precise. And this is also showing that when you look into a strong leadership positioning of procurement, you get better results. So simple it is. And this is definitely where we see successful companies are heading, having procurement also on the right level in the organization as part of the C-suite, really driving impact. And in the future, when you look what's happening in procurement right now, we have seen the impact on resilience and risk management due to the different catastrophes. We have seen now also there is a new topic coming up: sustainability, ESG targets. We see also that the value generation in the future, how will this be done? It might be done via suppliers, and on average 60% of the total cost of a company is procurement related. And basically, when you look at that, and by the way, a CEO only spends about 1% of their time with suppliers. So who is doing now the work, and who can really help to work with new innovative companies like for electric vehicles, looking into new business models, like we have seen it already with from coffee taps to smartphones. We see now that we have a semiconductor crisis right now. Basically, to find solutions, I think procurement really needs to step up to go to the next level and really has a very strong leadership positioning for the benefit of the company.
No, it's interesting the data, because I was actually going to ask you, does the level, the role that procurement has in the organization make an impact? It obviously does, and quite a big impact at that.
Yes.
And it was interesting when I look at the data in the report in terms of where procurement reports to. I mean, it was just pretty pretty splintered in terms of, CFO 25%, CEO 18%, COO 19%, Chief Supply Chain Officer 21%, and everybody else 17%. So pretty equal. As Christoph, you said, there's no kind of one size fits all approach. It's all just based on one, the organization, the individual organization and their culture, and two, don't take that wherever you report to as being, a positive or a negative. It's just you need to take a different approach in how you go beyond your reporting line. So I know it's about time to wrap up. The very last question that I have, and actually I'm not sure whether to ask this to you, Christoph, or to Marcell, and it's a very, hopefully an easy question. If folks who are listening today would like to get hold of the survey, where would be the best place for them to find it?
Let's make it simple. Let's put it in the show notes, Phil, of your podcast. We provide you with a link, and then everyone can download the survey. And we can also keep it updated, because doing an interview like with Art of Procurement, what we are doing right now with you, amazing. That's a great opportunity. But also others, very happy to connect that and to share the links.
Perfect. Yeah, we will definitely include that link then in our show notes. I'll also include both of your LinkedIn profiles in case anybody would like to reach out directly and connect with you. So all those are going to be at artofprocurement.com/podcast. That's artofprocurement.com/podcast. There you'll find all the kind of catalog of podcasts that we have here at Art of Procurement. And you'll find this one with Marcell and with Christoph amongst those pods, and all those links will be in those show notes. Christoph and Marcell, I want to thank you for joining me today and just sharing the details of your findings. I want to thank you for listening into today's episode of The Art of Procurement. To go deeper, including access to transcripts and actionable outtakes from the podcast, join the free level of our AOP Mastermind community. To learn more, go to artofprocurement.com/mastermind. And to find our entire back catalogue of almost 400 episodes, go to artofprocurement.com/podcast.